It was the kind of spring afternoon where the sun felt warm, the breeze was just right, and families filled the local park in Westfield, Missouri. Children raced across the grass with sticky hands and melted popsicles, their laughter echoing across the open field. Near the playground, 3-year-old Lily Thompson was doing what she loved most, chasing butterflies in her pink sundress, giggling as they danced out of reach. Her mother, Kayla, sat nearby on a bench, chatting with another parent, keeping one eye on Lily and the other on her newborn son resting in the stroller beside her. A few yards away, a group of uniformed officers was conducting a routine training session with their K-9 units. These exercises were standard, nothing more than a quick demo for community engagement. Just another way to show the public how well-trained and disciplined the dogs were. But something was off. Officer Daniels, a seasoned handler with over a decade of experience, was running Bruno, a large, powerful German shepherd with an impressive record. Bruno was always precise, always in control. But today, for reasons still unclear, that control snapped. A sudden commotion, a loud command, and then dash panic. Bruno broke free of his handler's grip, bolting across the park at full speed. In the blink of an eye, the playful calm shattered. Parents shouted. Someone screamed. Kayla turned just in time to see the massive dog charging directly toward her daughter. Lily froze. There was no time to react. Bruno lunged out, his teeth clamped onto Lily's tiny leg and dragged her down. Her screams sharp, piercing, full of terror sent chills through everyone within earshot. Kayla sprinted to her child, barely able to process what she was seeing. The world blurred. People ran. Phones came out. Officers tackled the dog and pulled him away. Bruno resisted, barking wildly, confused by the chaos he'd caused. Lily's pink sundress was soaked in blood. Kayla dropped to her knees beside her daughter, tears pouring from her eyes. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me," she cried, trying to keep pressure on the wound. Her own hands trembled as she dialed 911, though the police had already called it in. Within minutes, paramedics arrived. They carried Lily away on a stretcher, her cries growing softer. Kayla climbed into the ambulance, never letting go of her daughter's hand. Officer Daniels stood frozen, his heart racing, mouth dry. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He had trained that dog since it was a puppy. How could this happen? Bruno sat, now muzzled, eyes darting nervously, tail twitching. To him, it had all been a game, a blur of commands, sounds, and distractions. He didn't know what he had done, but the crowd did. The bystanders didn't care about intent. They saw a child mauled in a public space by a police dog. Within an hour, video clips were online, grainy footage of the dog attack, the screaming, the blood, the chaos. The footage spread fast. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram were flooded with outrage. #JusticeForLily began trending before the sun went down. At the hospital, doctors stabilized Lily. The bite had torn deep, but she would survive. She needed stitches, pain medication, and likely therapy for the trauma. Kayla sat by her bedside, still in shock. Her husband, Marcus, arrived minutes later, pale and trembling. One look at his daughter hooked to machines, her leg wrapped tight in bandages, and something in him broke. "I want answers," he whispered. "I want accountability." The town wanted the same. By that night, local news outlets were reporting. Non-stop, interviews with witnesses painted a terrifying picture. The police department issued a short, sterile statement. "We regret the unfortunate incident during today's K-9 training demonstration. The matter is under review." But that wasn't enough. Not for Lily's family, not for the town, and not for the millions who would soon see that little girl's face on their screens, bloodied, terrified, and caught in a tragedy no child should ever face. This wasn't just a dog attack. It was the beginning of something far bigger. By sunrise the next morning, the video of Lily's attack had been shared more than 5 million times. The footage was horrifying. Bruno's lunge, Lily's scream, her mother's frantic sprint, and the chaos that followed. News anchors replayed it on a loop. Headlines screamed, "Police dog mauls toddler in public park," and canine training goes horribly wrong. The town of Westfield was no longer quiet. The mayor called an emergency press conference, but gave little more than the police department's original statement. "An unfortunate incident," he said. "The situation is under review." The public didn't want a review. They wanted action. By noon, dozens of protesters gathered outside the Westfield Police Department. They held signs that read, "She's just 3. Protect, don't attack, and justice for Lily." More people joined each hour. Local pastors, school teachers, and even off-duty officers showed up, not in uniform, but as concerned citizens. Inside the hospital, Lily was still in recovery. Her leg had been stitched, and the bleeding had stopped, but doctors warned there might be long-term damage, both physical and emotional. Her mother stayed by her side, holding her daughter's hand through every hour. Lily asked the same question, over and over. "Why did the puppy bite me?" Kyla didn't know how to answer. Marcus paced the hallway outside the room. He was a quiet man, strong and steady, but this had broken him. He had always believed in rules, in process. But now his daughter was the face of a viral tragedy, and no one was taking responsibility. When the police department offered a private apology and a financial settlement to avoid court, Marcus refused. He didn't want hush money. He wanted the truth exposed. So he hired a lawyer, a fierce civil rights attorney named Rachel Devine, who had handled major cases against police departments before. "This wasn't just a dog," Rachel said in her first public statement. "This was a weapon. A weapon the department failed to control. And that weapon attacked a child. The legal strategy was aggressive. They filed a $3.5 million lawsuit for negligence, emotional trauma, and endangerment. The suit targeted not only the police department, but also Officer Daniels directly, citing reckless handling of a dangerous animal in a public setting. Officer Daniels was devastated. He hadn't slept since the incident. He watched the video again and again, replaying the moment Bruno slipped free. In his mind, he kept screaming the command, "Stay." But the leash snapped, and Bruno ran. Daniels had trained the dog for 4 years. Bruno had never bitten a civilian. He had trusted him completely. Now he was suspended, facing public hatred and possible termination. And worse, he was haunted by Lily's scream. The media framed him as either a careless monster or a tragic scapegoat. The truth was more complicated something. Even Officer Daniels himself wasn't sure of anymore. Behind closed doors, the city attorneys debated how to contain the fallout. Settling quickly might avoid further damage, but the public wanted a trial. The judge overseeing the case was known for being unconventional and thorough. And when the lawyers submitted the witness list, one name shocked everyone: Lily Thompson. There was immediate backlash. "She's just a baby." Some cried. "It's traumatizing," others said, but Lily's mother insisted. Her daughter had something to say, something simple, something important. The judge agreed under very strict conditions. A child psychologist would be present. The courtroom would be partially closed, and the defendant, Bruno the canine, would be brought into the courtroom not as a criminal, but as a subject of the testimony. It was unprecedented, emotional, controversial. It was happening. The hearing was set for the following Thursday. As the town prepared for what some called the trial of the year. Emotions boiled over. Petitions flew. TV crews camped outside the courthouse. Supporters and critics flooded the internet with opinion videos and tweets. National figures began commenting. And across the country, parents clutched their children a little tighter. Everyone wanted to know, what would a 3-year-old girl say when she came face to face with the dog who hurt her? The ripple effect of Lily's words reached far beyond Westfield. By the next morning, #Hizari was trending on every major platform. Talk shows, podcasts, and online forums exploded with conversation. People were divided, but deeply moved. Journalists scrambled to analyze what had happened in that quiet courtroom. Some framed Lily as a modern-day symbol of compassion. Others debated whether forgiveness meant accountability had been compromised. But nearly everyone agreed. A 3-year-old girl had shifted the public narrative in a way no adult could. News anchors across the country replayed a hand-drawn sketch of the courtroom, showing Lily, her bunny, and Bruno side by side. It became a viral image, shared alongside comments like, "She has more grace than most adults, and if only our justice system had her heart." In Westfield, something unexpected happened. The protests outside the police department began to quiet, not out of defeat, but reflection. People who had once shouted in fury now stood in silence, holding candles. One mother tied a sign to the fence. "Lily chose peace. Let's choose change." Within days, the police department announced sweeping reforms. They suspended all K-9 demonstrations and training in public parks. Officers would now be required to wear body cams during canine handling, and an independent canine ethics committee would be formed, an unprecedented step. Chief Reynolds, who had faced mounting criticism, gave an emotional press conference. "We failed to prevent a tragedy," he said, "but we will not fail to learn from it." Officer Daniels also spoke again, this time in a carefully recorded interview. He sat quietly across from the reporter, his badge placed on the table beside him, voluntarily surrendered. "Lily gave me a second chance," he said, voice shaking. "I don't take that lightly. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her forgiveness." When asked about Bruno, Daniels hesitated. "He wasn't just my partner. He was my friend. But he's not a tool anymore. He's a dog. And if he gets to live the rest of his life just being loved, maybe that's justice too." Meanwhile, Lily's family was overwhelmed by the attention. Dozens of gifts poured in. Stuffed animals, cards from strangers, art pieces, and even a book deal offer. But Kayla and Marcus refused commercial offers. "This isn't a story for profit," Kayla told the journalist. "It's our daughter's truth." However, they did agree to one thing: a public campaign for safer police canine protocols. With the help of Rachel Devine, they launched the Lily Grace Initiative, a nonprofit aimed at training officers in trauma awareness, child sensitivity, and humane canine management. The campaign raised over $500,000 in its first week. As Lily recovered physically, she continued to heal emotionally. Her therapist said she displayed remarkable emotional intelligence for her age. She still asked questions about the dog, and she still talked about the courtroom, not with fear, but with clarity. One day, while coloring during therapy, Lily drew a picture of Bruno with a speech bubble that read, "I didn't mean it." Below it, she added her own line, "It's okay." The therapist showed it to Kayla, who stared at the drawing for a long moment. "How can someone so small be so big?" She whispered. Back in the town square, a mural was painted near the courthouse, a soft watercolor of a little girl standing face to face with a German shepherd. Below it, in bold white letters, the quote that had captured a nation, "Hizari." It became more than a phrase. It became a message. Schools began incorporating Lily's story into empathy training. Churches gave sermons about her response. Police academies reviewed their K-9 programs. Across the country, people re-examined what justice, accountability, and forgiveness really meant dot in the chaos of anger, fear, and blame. Lily had done what few could. She had paused the noise, not to excuse, not to forget, but to remind everyone that even in pain, empathy still has power. And sometimes, the smallest voice is the one that changes everything. What began as a moment of heartbreak in a quiet park had now bloomed into a national call for transformation. While the headlines moved on to other scandals and stories, Westfield was still feeling the impact of Lily's courtroom whisper. And unlike many viral events, this one wasn't fading. It was growing roots. The Lily Grace Initiative gained structure quickly. Community organizers, pediatric trauma specialists, and former police officers signed on to help. The initiative launched training programs for law enforcement on trauma-informed care, canine behavior under stress, and most importantly, the long-term emotional effects on child victims. Kayla, still balancing motherhood and the whirlwind surrounding them, took on a more public role. She spoke at town halls and university conferences, her voice both steady and heartfelt. "My daughter's forgiveness wasn't weakness," she would say. "It was strength wrapped in innocence." And it reminded us what accountability looks like when paired with empathy. Marcus preferred to stay behind the scenes, helping manage the logistics of the nonprofit. But even he, the once quiet warehouse worker, became a voice of measured wisdom. In one recorded interview, he said, "We didn't want to burn everything down. We wanted to build something better, for our daughter and for yours." Meanwhile, Officer Daniels had quietly taken a position within a new police program called Blue Bridges, a public outreach effort focused on humanizing officers and rebuilding trust. He began speaking at high schools and training academies. His message wasn't defensive, it was reflective. "I made a mistake that had consequences," he said at one event. "But I was also shown compassion by someone who owed me nothing. That changes you." The most surprising transformation, though, came from Bruno. Now removed from service, he had been placed in a rehabilitation foster home run by an experienced animal therapist named Jen Navarro. Bruno's early weeks there were shaky. He was restless, easily startled, and clearly confused by the shift in routine. But over time, under Jen's careful guidance, Bruno began to settle. He became calmer, gentler. She taught him how to be a regular dog again. No sharp commands, no aggressive drills. Just morning walks, naps in the sun, and the occasional peanut butter treat. Bruno responded beautifully. When Lily's family was invited to visit months later, Jean made sure everything was carefully prepared. Lily, now 4, ran across the grass toward Bruno with no fear in her step. She giggled as the German shepherd wagged his tail and licked her hand. Kayla gasped, tears flooding her eyes. "He remembers her," Jean whispered. "I think they both remember each other," Marcus replied. After that visit, Bruno's fate was officially sealed. He would be adopted, no longer a tool, but a pet. Jean asked if Lily wanted to help name his new life. Lily thought for a moment and then said, "He's not Bruno anymore. He's Sonny." And so Sonny began his new chapter, just as Lily's life began shifting to. As she entered preschool, her teachers were amazed at her emotional awareness. One day, when a classmate pushed another child, Lily calmly walked up and said, "Maybe he didn't mean it, but we still say sorry." Her words became her way of navigating the world, a balance of accountability and kindness. The town of Westfield leaned into its newfound identity. It became known as a model for how communities can evolve after tragedy. Other cities reached out to learn from the Lily Grace Initiative. Grants were offered, policies were rewritten. Old tensions softened. 1 year after the courtroom hearing, the mayor announced that June 4th would officially be known as Lily Grace Day, a day to honor children's voices, empathy and justice, and safer communities. At the dedication ceremony, Lily was asked if she remembered what happened that day. In court, she nodded, gripping her bunny by the ear. "I said he's sorry. Do you still believe that?" The reporter asked. She smiled. "Yes, and I'm okay now." And in those 6 words, just like before, she reminded the world of something we too often forget. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's choosing to heal. By the time Lily turned 5, the scars on her leg had faded into pale reminders of the past, barely visible, yet always present. But it wasn't the physical marks that lingered. It was the story, the journey, and the unexpected strength that continued to define her life. At school, Lily was curious, kind, and fearless in the way children are when they know nothing of fear until it finds them. Her teacher, Miss Carter, often called her an old soul. Lily had a quiet confidence about her, the kind that made her classmates look to her when someone cried or felt left out. She still brought Bunny to class every day, though now a bit tattered and missing one ear. She told her friends, "He's brave too." And when she drew pictures of dogs, there was always one with a yellow sun over its head and a little girl standing nearby. That one was always named Sunny. Sunny had found his forever home with Jean Navarro. Though he no longer wore a badge, his gentle demeanor and calm nature led Jean to register him as a certified therapy dog. Sunny began visiting pediatric hospitals and rehabilitation centers. Children who were too afraid to speak found comfort in stroking his fur. Parents who once feared dogs learned to trust again. And whenever someone asked about his past, Jean would say simply, "He was saved by a little girl with a big heart." One Saturday, Jean and Sunny returned to Westfield for a special event, the unveiling of the new children's therapy garden at Lily's hospital. Named the Grace Garden, it was a peaceful place filled with butterfly bushes, shaded benches, and murals painted by kids. On the opening day, Lily was invited to cut the ribbon. As she walked up with her family, Sunny bounded toward her. Though taller now, Lily still bent down with excitement, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Hi, Sunny," she whispered. "Missed you." The moment was captured by dozens of photographers, but the photo that went viral again wasn't posed. It was the one where Lily knelt in the grass, forehead resting gently on Sunny's, both eyes closed, their bond still unbroken. Inside the hospital's new therapy wing, a framed quote hung on the wall beside her photo. "Sometimes the smallest hearts carry the biggest forgiveness." Lily Thompson, age 3. Despite the media attention, Lily's parents tried to keep her life grounded. They still lived in the same neighborhood. Marcus still worked at the warehouse. Kayla volunteered at the local library. Fame had come knocking, but they only opened the door wide enough to let purpose and not profit. Still, the world didn't forget Lily. She was invited to speak at conferences on childhood trauma. Her parents spoke while she colored beside them. School counselors asked for copies of the children's book her story had inspired. And advocacy groups used her case to push for better protections in schools, parks, and police procedures across the country. But for Lily, it wasn't about being famous. It was about being okay. In an interview conducted for a documentary on childhood resilience, Lily was asked what she thought bravery meant. She paused, then said, "It means telling the truth even if you're scared, and loving someone even if they made a mistake." The room went silent. Later, her mother would say that Lily didn't just recover from trauma, she rose from it. She found her voice in a moment that could have silenced her. She turned pain into purpose, fear into forgiveness. And through it all, she remained a child, joyful, playful, and filled with wonder. As Lily's 6th birthday approached, her town planned a surprise. A parade in her honor, not to remember the attack, but to celebrate the growth that came after it. The theme was simple: little voice, big change. And at the front of the parade, riding in a decorated float full of stuffed animals, was Lily Bunny in one hand, waving with the other. Right beside her, wearing a flowered collar and a goofy tongue-out grin, sat Sonny. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in the park. The world had changed a dozen times since then, but in Westfield, one memory remained like a steady light in the town's heart. A little girl, just 3 years old, standing in a courtroom and whispering 2 words that changed everything. Lily. Thompson was now 8. She still carried her bunny everywhere, though he had been stitched up many times. She had outgrown the scar on her leg, but never outgrown her empathy. In fact, it had grown with her. She volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends, reading to dogs waiting for adoption. Her favorite to read was still The Brave Dog and The Butterfly, a children's book inspired by her own story written anonymously by a local teacher who had followed her journey closely. At school, Lily was known not for what happened to her, but for what she did with it. If a kid fell on the playground, Lily was the first to help them up. If a student was bullied, she didn't lash out, she invited them to sit beside her. It wasn't something she tried to do. It was who she was. Sonny, now a certified senior therapy dog, still visited the hospital children's wing every Tuesday, escorted by Jean Navarro. Though a little slower now, and mostly white around the muzzle, he remained calm, gentle, and attentive. And whenever he visited Westfield Elementary, the children swarmed him with joy. On the 5th anniversary of the courthouse hearing, the mayor of Westfield unveiled a bronze sculpture in front of City Hall. The statue showed a little girl barefoot, bunny in hand facing a German shepherd sitting calmly, tail curled around his paws. The plaque at the base read, "He's sorry. Lily Grace Thompson, age 3, in memory of a moment that taught the world the power of forgiveness." The event drew hundreds. Reporters returned to the town, but this time they weren't chasing a tragedy. They were celebrating a legacy. Kayla and Marcus stood beside their daughter as the cloth was pulled from the statue. Kayla wiped a tear. Marcus stood tall, hand on Lily's shoulder. As the crowd clapped, Lily simply smiled. It wasn't a boastful smile. It was a quiet, knowing one, the kind of smile that doesn't need attention, just understanding. Rachel Devine, who had once led the courtroom charge, spoke to the crowd. There are few times in a lawyer's career where the smallest witness gives the biggest testimony. Lily didn't just speak. She changed the course of law, empathy, and community responsibility. She reminded us that the law can be fair, but it takes people to make it kind. That night, national broadcasts once again told Lily's story, but with a new focus. It wasn't about the attack anymore. It was about what came after. About how a single act of forgiveness had led to systemic change, community healing, and thousands of children finding their voices in the aftermath of trauma. Universities studied her case. Police departments across the country revamped their K-9 programs, citing the Westfield protocols. Schools launched annual Compassion Week programs inspired by Lily's message. Even therapy training programs for service animals started emphasizing behavioral awareness in high-stimulation environments. But for Lily, all the attention still felt like something happening outside her window while she remained grounded in the things that truly mattered: her family, her friends, her bunny, and the dog who once hurt her, who now helped others heal. One evening, Lily sat on her porch, the statue visible in the distance, glowing under the town's lights. Sonny lay beside her, his head on her foot, tail thumping lightly. "Do you think he remembers?" she asked her mom. Kayla smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe he just knows you forgave him." Lily thought for a moment, then rested her head on Sonny's back. "I think sometimes being sorry means changing. And maybe that's enough." And with those quiet words, the story that had once shaken a town came full circle, not with a dramatic end, but with a peaceful truth that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation days before the hearing. Local news vans were parked bumper to bumper. Satellite dishes pointed skyward. Reporters from national networks walked the courthouse steps, rehearsing lines and filming live updates. Everyone was waiting not for a politician or celebrity, but for a toddler. Lily Thompson had become a symbol. To some, she was the face of innocence, wounded by reckless authority. To others, she was a child unfairly thrust into a legal circus. But to her family, she was just Lily, the little girl who still asked for bedtime stories, still held her stuffed bunny tight, and still cried if she scraped her knee. Kayla and Marcus were torn. They wanted to protect their daughter, to shield her from flashing cameras and angry debates. But they also knew Lily had a voice. A small one, yes, but maybe the only voice that could cut through the noise. Rachel Devine, their attorney, agreed. The courtroom will be secure, she promised. No media inside, just the judge, the lawyers, and you. A child psychologist was brought in to prepare Lily, Dr. Karen. Ellis had worked with traumatized children for over 2 decades. She met Lily in a bright room filled with toys and crayons. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked gently. Lily nodded. "To talk about the doggy." Dr. Ellis kept the conversation soft. She let Lily color, play, and tell stories. And what surprised her was how calm the child remained when speaking about Bruno. "He didn't mean it," Lily said at one point, tracing her crayon over a drawing of a puppy. Dr. Ellis watched her closely. Lily wasn't denying her pain. She remembered the attack. She remembered the hospital, the blood, the tears. But in her mind, something else had taken root. Understanding. "She's not afraid," Dr. Ellis told the court later. "She's thoughtful, curious. She's ready." Meanwhile, across town, Officer Daniels sat alone in his apartment, holding Bruno's collar in his lap. The department had taken the dog away pending evaluation. His home felt empty. The silence gnawed at him. He hadn't spoken publicly since the incident, but now reporters stalked his street. Some painted him as a negligent officer who lost control. Others claimed he was being scapegoated. Daniels didn't care what the headlines said. All he wanted was to know how the girl was doing. He had watched the hearing, noticed with a sinking heart. They were really bringing Lily to court. And Bruno, chewed out at the police kennel, Bruno was being monitored. Veterinarians said he showed no signs of aggression since the attack. Behaviorists reviewed his training history, noting a spotless record until the park. Some suspected the sudden loud music at the event may have triggered confusion. A siren test had gone off just before the incident. Bruno, trained to respond to distress calls, may have misinterpreted the sound, but none of that erased what had happened. The morning of the hearing arrived with eerie stillness. The courthouse was surrounded by barriers to keep press and protesters at a distance. Inside, the room was quiet. Just a judge, the legal teams, Lily's family, a therapist, and Officer Daniels. Bruno was brought in last, muzzled, calm, led gently by a different handler. Lily entered holding her mother's hand and her bunny in the other. She wore a yellow dress, her legs still bandaged beneath white tights. The room stood still as she walked in. The judge smiled gently. "Hi, Lily. You can sit if you want." Lily looked around, wide-eyed. Then her eyes met Bruno's. Her hand tightened around her bunny. Everyone leaned forward. The judge spoke again. "Would you like to say anything, sweetheart?" Lily looked up at her mom, who nodded with a gentle smile. Then, the little girl stepped forward. She pointed at the dog, tilted her head, and said 2 soft words barely above a whisper, but loud enough to shake the room. "He's sorry." A gasp swept through the courtroom. Lily stood there, calm, innocent, But her words hit like a THUNDERCLAP. No one knew it yet. But those two words were about to change everything. The silence that followed Lily's two-word statement was louder than any courtroom argument could have been. He's sorry. Her voice was soft, uncertain in tone, but steady in intent. Everyone in the courtroom, judge, lawyers, officers, and even her parents froze in place. The atmosphere shifted. Something raw and deeply human filled the air. For a moment, all the legal jargon, all the strategy and accusations vanished. There was only a small girl, a stuffed bunny, and a powerful truth that adults had overlooked. Judge Carrington leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "Lily," he asked gently, "can you tell us what you mean?" Lily pointed at Bruno, who sat calmly beside the handler. He didn't mean to. He looked scared after. She looked down at her bandaged leg. "He's sorry." Officer Daniels swallowed hard. For the first time since the attack, he couldn't hold back his emotion. Tears filled his eyes. He had braced himself for fury, for rejection, for the judgment he felt he deserved. But Lily hadn't screamed. She hadn't cried. She had forgiven. Bruno wagged his tail once, sensing the shift in the room, but not understanding why. Lily turned to the judge again. "He's not bad." Her voice was like a match dropped in the dry kindling of a courtroom full of tension. It lit something compassion. Maybe, or guilt, or hope. Rachel Devine, the family's attorney, looked stunned. This wasn't part of any planned testimony. It wasn't coached. It was purely Lily's voice, unfiltered and innocent. As an attorney, Rachel had seen countless cases where victims demanded justice with fury. But here stood a child choosing mercy. The courtroom remained silent for several more seconds until the judge cleared his throat. "Thank you, Lily. That was very brave of you." Lily turned and walked back to her seat, climbing onto her mother's lap, Bunny still in hand. Kayla kissed her forehead and held her close. Her eyes brimmed with tears, unsure if they were from pride or heartbreak or both. Officer Daniels requested to speak. The judge allowed it. "I don't know how to express what I feel," Daniels began, voice cracking. "That day, I lost control of a dog I trusted with my life, and that failure changed hers. I'm sorry, Lily. I'm sorry. Kayla, I'm sorry to your family." He paused, looking directly at Lily. Bruno was trained to protect. But something went wrong, and I will never stop regretting it. Rachel stood to respond, but paused. Instead of pressing her case, she said simply, "We never expected forgiveness, Your Honor. We came for accountability." What Lily offered today, none of us could have predicted. The judge asked both legal teams to step outside while he deliberated. The doors closed behind them, and the media, though barred from the room, buzzed with leaked information. Within minutes, someone inside had tweeted the two words, "He's sorry." By the time the courtroom reopened, those words were already trending globally. The judge issued a temporary ruling. Bruno would not be euthanized. Instead, he would be retired permanently from police duty and evaluated for placement in a rehabilitation program. Officer Daniels would remain on leave pending departmental review, and the city was to begin an independent investigation into canine training standards and public safety protocols. But the most surprising order came at the end. "I'm recommending mediation, not litigation," Judge Carrington said. "Because sometimes the law alone doesn't bring healing. Sometimes it takes a child to remind us of that." Outside the courthouse, the crowd awaited news. When Kayla walked out holding Lily in her arms, dozens of cameras flashed. A reporter shouted, "Did she really forgive the dog?" Kayla smiled faintly and kissed her daughter's cheek. She said what she felt. I think the world needed to hear it. Lily, half asleep on her mother's shoulder, whispered again more, to herself than anyone else. He's a good boy now. And in that moment, the world stopped shouting and started listening.